what you can do to shift your inner critic relationship is to honor that you're there for relations, not transactions. And that will impact not only your goals and what you're saying you want to accomplish when you do go to these events, but it's actually going to impact how you feel and how you show up when you are there. Hello and welcome to the Unlock Lab. I'm your host, Tosca DiMatteo, and you are listening to episode number 55, the Inner Critic series. And this one is about how networking sucks. So if you have ever hesitated to go to a networking event, if you hate networking, if this is something that you loathe, if you are constantly battling yourself about whether or not you should go to the thing, meet new people, all of that, this episode is for you. And I was inspired to do this episode because I did an Instagram post and it got a lot more attention than I would have expected. So I hope you stick with this because I think you're going to find some really valuable information that will help you battle yourself less when it comes to making a decision about if you're going to attend the networking event or proactively meet new people. This episode is one of an Inner Critic series that I've been doing really since the beginning of launching this podcast. So if you have other inner critics running around, I definitely recommend listening to some of the other episodes on the Inner Critic series. All right. But first, if you're new to the podcast, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. I am the founder of Tosca Coaching and Consulting, and I do work and helping people and organizations at the intersection of personal growth and professional development. So finding our way to get out of our own way in the pursuit of our biggest dreams, even if we don't know what they are yet. And trust me, I've had many a days in my life where I didn't know what exactly I wanted. So if this resonates for you, you can find out more at coachtosca.com. That's coach, Tosca.com. All right. So here we are talking about networking. Maybe you love it. Maybe you hate it. Maybe it's a little bit of both. And maybe sometimes you love it. Sometimes you hate it. And you can think about networking in a few different ways, not just about, oh, I'm looking for the next job, but also maybe internal networking, like meeting more folks within your organization. Maybe you have a side hustle or are an entrepreneur. You can think about networking in terms of client prospecting. Or even getting together with friends. You know, you can think about networking in terms of, are you saying yes to the social activities? Whichever one kind of resonates for you as I'm going through this, awesome. And maybe a couple of them will. So just pay attention to what comes up for you because that's just priceless information about what you think about when you hear this podcast in general and in particular topics. So diving in a little bit here, what does the networking inner critic say to you? You can stop and pause this and ask yourself, what does my inner critic usually say when I'm deciding if I'm going to sign up for the thing or actually walk out the door? Here are some of the things that they have said to me, my networking inner critic. My inner critic will say, it's not going to be worth going. Like it's going to be a waste of your time. It's also told me you don't fit in. These are not your people. I've also heard myself say, it's going to be so draining. You're just going to walk out of there needing a nap. Other things I have said to myself is, this is so cliquey. You're going to feel like an outsider. It's going to feel gross and you're going to feel sad. There will be other people there that do what you do. It's going to feel competitive and again, it's going to feel gross. My inner critic also has said to me, you hate small talk. All networking is small talk. Sometimes it's even told me it's going to be a popularity contest. All of these depend on what is the networking situation. What is the organization? What is the group? All the things. And what my inner critic says to me changes based on the day, how I'm feeling. Have I been in the dumps? If I've been in the dumps, the networking inner critic is often even more harsh and negative, to be honest with you. And look, are some of these things true that the inner critic says? Well, they could be, right? I'm not going to lie, right? Some places can feel cliquey. Some places may feel like a competition. But also, since the actual event hasn't happened yet and we don't know what it's actually going to be like, then they are telling you a lie. Your inner critic is telling you a lie about what that event is going to be based on maybe past experiences, being burned, or feeling a certain way in the past. So, what we have to do is make way for the truth. We have to really see the truth of what our inner critic is telling us. For example, one of the things I mentioned is, oh, there are clicks there. You're going to feel like an outsider. Well, yes, maybe it's true that I've been to this particular organization's events before and they have felt clicky. But what I don't know is maybe it won't feel clicky. Maybe those particular people won't be there. Or maybe it will feel clicky, but what else do I want to actually lead with in terms of my argument for saying yes to going? And maybe somebody steps out of the clique and they want to meet me. I don't know. Right. So we have to really make space for possibility because our inner critic tells us things in such definitive terms like it will be this is what exactly is going to happen, and our inner critic can't predict the future. So we have to be very mindful when we hear things like absolutes in the messages that we're telling ourselves. That is likely an inner critic running the roost. Now look, if you know anything about me, you know I've spent 25 years in corporate and I have absolutely had to do a ton of networking in a certain kind of way for that, to find jobs, to learn about companies, to certainly network internally in trying to figure out how to do my job and get my job done well. And now, as an entrepreneur for over 6 years, right, I've had to do a different kind of networking in terms of finding people to hire for things that I need done. Also, networking to find potential clients and people that I can possibly help. I've experienced the gambit of networking. And generally speaking, I'll be honest with you, I do love meeting new people. And I'm very quick to be hopeful about new connections, to be honest, almost to a fault sometimes, because I kind of go all in on people and relationships early on. And I've learned to temper that. But I say this to say that I am not someone that necessarily loathes networking. However, there are definitely times in my life where I'm more resistant to it for sure. And definitely certain moments when I'm just feeling more hopeless than others, especially as it relates to building my business, where, when I'm feeling hopeless, it's like I really got to drag my butt out of the house to go to a networking event, right? And oftentimes I don't because I let that inner critic win. But let me share a couple of quick networking stories to see if you resonate with any of these as we're kind of talking about this phenomenon of what happens when our inner critic is trying to protect us and hold us back. One of the most, I don't know, memorable times where I was networking was actually in an internal situation. And I had just joined a new company and I literally didn't know anybody in this company. And, I'm patting myself on the back. Kudos to me for the interview process because I got in there without anybody knowing much about me other than how I presented myself and what I shared, on my documents and resumes and stuff. So when I got in there, I was like, man, yeah, I got to meet people. I got to figure out how things work. And I remember I think I went on LinkedIn to try to find people I might know, or maybe somebody proactively reached out to me after I posted that I was working for this company. And this person happened to be in a very high up position in a different function than my own. Right. And one of the first things that I did in my first, let's just say, couple of weeks on the job was I reached out and said, hey, I'm here and like, be great to grab coffee or something. And the gentleman was totally open to it, right? So it was like, yeah, I was trying to find my belonging, right? I was trying to find people that could maybe give me some tips as I stepped into this entirely new company, a whole new industry, a whole new culture. I mean, everything was new. And not long after I had that conversation, my boss at the time said to me, hey, you really shouldn't be talking to this guy. And the reason why he said this, And I don't know the exact words, but he was basically telling me, look, stay at your level, network within your level. Don't be circumventing the hierarchy and talking to people that are three, four times your pay grade. Like it's not appropriate. First of all, that said a lot about who he was. It said a lot about culture. It said a lot about a lot of things to me. And it was really harmful because I felt like I had to, I don't know, like I was being restricted, right? Like I had to stay in a certain lane. And it just really stuck out to me in terms of, well, who do I have permission to talk to? Right? Like you can imagine how something like this would stick with you, maybe in very subconscious ways. But if I'm honest, one of the reasons why I left corporate is because I don't like to be told who I can and cannot talk to. Right? I mean, among many other things. But I share this story to say sometimes we are told in overt and covert ways what's acceptable in terms of who we're networking with. And of course, the funny thing about this story, right, is that my networking with this gentleman in a whole other function would only serve myself and my department because in building strong relationships, trust gets built and it gets easier to get things done and have honest conversations and on and on. So, this mentality that my boss had at the time was completely not in service of anything but probably his own ego. So, these types of networking stories, this is just one example. Like it can really impact how we feel about putting ourselves out there. I'll share another networking story. So, at one point in my entrepreneurial journey, I joined an organization that had co working space. And a big reason why I decided to join was because I had been feeling isolated in my own office. And because I am a people person, I felt like I needed to be around other people to feel energized, all the things. So I joined this organization to check it out. And I realized that this co working space really wasn't designed or created, or the culture wasn't such that you could just, sit next to somebody and kind of tap them on the shoulder and say, hey, what are you working on? That people brought their computers, right? And they were working. And if they were talking to other people, it was people that they already knew. And right in that way, maybe it was clicky or maybe it was like they were there to do business. But I realized I had joined this thing for the sake of networking, for the sake of getting out of my tunnel and my cave and my office. And I felt like if I spoke with somebody that I was going to be intrusive to their day or that really wasn't what this space was designed for. And it really turned me off, quite frankly, to co-working in general, because I think that they're built more to connect in terms of maybe in the content that they provide outside of the workday. But again, that situation, joining a co-working space, made me feel more lonely sitting there than being at home with my pup. And I think that's an indication of work that I had to do as well, right? I'm not placing blame. I'm also like, well, what was my mindset at that time? Where was I in terms of my confidence and in terms of my willingness to maybe interrupt somebody? So, part of these networking stories that we carry with us, whether or not we realize it or not, does impact how we show up because we're always bringing our baggage with us unless we are literally doing the work to clear out our luggage and put the baggage on the shelf. So I'll share one other story about networking, and that has to do with my task as a business owner to prospect clients. And I have gone through phases of networking, of being very hands off about pitching myself, for lack of a better word. And then I've gone through phases where I kind of lean in and help people see more, I would say more aggressively, right? Hey, this is what's possible. Like, hey, look at what can change for your life. And frankly, I'm not really settled out exactly. Well, I am settled out, but I still battle myself in terms of what's the right networking slash prospecting approach. And I've read books and I've attended different trainings, and it's very personal, I think, and it's very much understanding the difference between your authenticity and the difference between pushing through resistance for things that feel uncomfortable for the sake of your own growth. But I share that story to say that, you know what, networking and the challenges that we have with it and the resistance that we have with it come with good reason. They come with experiences that may have been really challenging or hard to take. And our networking inner critics don't remember what happened that was amazing and good and magical because we said yes to meeting new people and to networking. So I just want to offer that in terms of sitting with yourself and saying, what do I bring with me when it comes to networking? And maybe that word itself is triggering to you. I know it definitely can be triggering to people. So maybe you might want to consider what maybe I need to reframe. What's the word I want to use instead of networking so that I'm not bringing the baggage of what that networking word means to me? One of the things that I talk about is just having conversations. What if you reframed it to say, hey, I'm going to go to this thing and just have a bunch of conversations with people I don't know? I often reframe the word interview with people as having a conversation because that can feel less daunting and come with less baggage. Okay, I think you're picking up what I'm putting down on all of this. So, what do we do then with this inner critic that tells us not to say yes to these things? Maybe to say yes to the gathering where you know two people, but you don't know the other 15. Or the inner critic that's telling you, don't bother going into the city, making that big trek. It's not going to be worth it. And it's just going to be draining. What do? The first thing you do is you check in with how you actually feel about the event versus how your inner critic narrative is making you feel because of what they're saying. And this might take a few minutes to just really sit in silence with yourself and to really check in. And you can check in with your body. Like, does your body feel expansive or does it feel constricted? Does it feel a little bit interested or excited, or does it feel like really heavy? Because that is the truth of if this event is something that will serve you, not the inner critic narrative. Because, like I said, that narrative is telling you lies. All right, the next thing you can do with this inner critic is get real with what your actual objective is for the gathering, for the networking, or whatever. Because often what happens is we set the bar at an impossible or unrealistic place. And then we go and we're disappointed and tell ourselves it was a waste of time when actually it wasn't. So, for example, if I'm going to an event and I'm telling myself, oh, I'm going to meet 20 new warm leads for my business, that's a really, really high bar. And maybe that doesn't actually bring me excitement. Maybe what I don't want to do is go to an event and meet a whole bunch of people. Maybe what I actually want to do is just go and have a real deep, authentic conversation with one person, and that would make me happy. Right. So our inner critic will start to tell us all these things based on objectives and goals that we actually aren't aligned with. So the thing that you can do is say, well, what actually am I trying to get out of this? And maybe your goal is just to go, and just going is the success metric. Maybe it's, you know what? I just want to meet one person that I vibe with while I'm there. That may extend to a conversation outside of that event. And to be quite honest, that's often the objective that I have for myself when I go to networking events. Like, if I can have one awesome conversation with one person like that, that would make it worth it. Because how hard is it to find people that you vibe with, right? All right. The third thing I would say is when it comes to networking, and this is actually like going back to the Instagram post that I did that caught a little bit of fire that I didn't expect. And that is, are you approaching the networking with a transactional mindset or relational? Because if you're going in there with, I'm going to find all these potential job opportunities versus I'm going to meet somebody who will actually get to know me and be interested in what I have to offer, those are very different mindsets. And we live in a world in which it's leading with transaction. It's leading with getting the job done. It's leading with doing the thing, checking the box. It's focused on quantity over quality. And what I'm saying is what you can do to shift your inner critic relationship is to honor that you're there for relations, not transactions. And that will impact not only your goals and what you're saying you want to accomplish when you do go to these events, but it's actually going to impact how you feel and how you show up when you are there. And I want to take this moment here to remind you that our inner critics are showing up because they're there to keep you safe or protect you in some way, shape, or form. And if this is new for you, then I highly recommend listening to my episode. It was early on within the first, I think, 10 episodes of like Inner Critics 101, right? Which is our inner critics show up early on in our lives, probably earlier than you think, because we needed some protection or some safety in order to get what we actually needed in our lives, be it love, be it food, shelter, whatever those basic needs were. And now the inner critic is operating still when we really don't need it. We don't need to keep ourselves safe from disappointment because we know how to handle disappointment and we know we're not going to die. And we know that we belong to ourselves first and foremost. And we don't need to be accepted by some peer group like we did when we were 4 or 5, right? One of the things you can ask yourself and journal about is what is your inner critic really afraid of as it relates to going to these networking events? And then you can choose what is the value, what is the goal, what is the mindset, what is the dream that you want to honor more than the fear. And that's how you make a different decision. And that's how you make sure your inner critic isn't running your life. And I want you to consider, what are you risking by letting your inner critic win the battle? Because it often is a battle in our mind. Do we say yes to this thing? Do we put ourselves out there? Do we say yes to vulnerability? Or do we stay in our comfort zone? Do we stay in our house? Do we turn on Netflix and pop the popcorn because that feels so much better than getting out there and meeting new people? What are we risking by letting our inner critic win the battle? I could start with a list, but the list will go on and on. But I want you to consider it for yourself or what's true for you. We risk missing connections, connections to people that can add tremendous value to our life, joy, happiness. And it may not be even work related. Maybe it's the next love of your life. Maybe it's a work spouse, you know? Maybe it's somebody that can connect you with somebody else that is really meant for you. We risk missing opportunities. And I mean opportunities for doors to be open, opportunities to meet people different than ourselves that add tremendous value to our lives, missing opportunities to say yes to other things and other connections. We risk a chance to feel less lonely in the world. But that does require vulnerability. It does require us to put ourselves out there in an authentic way. We risk not meeting somebody who can lift us up, if not just for that one moment in that one event. We risk joy because as humans, our joy comes from connection and meeting other people. So these are just some of the things we risk when we let our inner critic win the battle. I have to say thank you also before I wrap this episode, because as I was typing up the notes for what I wanted to tell you guys about on this episode, I realized that there was a virtual event happening today, this evening, that I had not yet responded to because I was hedging, because my inner critic had been winning the battle of saying, well, you could do something better with your time other than spend this hour networking. And I said, you know what? Let me honor this episode and sign up, which I did. So thank you. Even though there was resistance, even though I didn't really feel like doing it today, I am, and I did say yes, because I know I want to lead with integrity with you guys, but also I want to lead with putting myself out there for the sake of my dream of having this business last as long as I do. So I hope that this was helpful in unpacking a little bit of your resistance to networking. And I completely get it. We are not all wired for walking into rooms with 50, 100 people and meeting as many as we can. And hopefully that's not the message that I've shared. I understand some folks are really, really drained by meeting folks. And, you know, whether you identify as introvert, extrovert, ambivert, whatever. And as I want to honor that, you know, some people networking and spending time among others and strangers is really, really difficult. And this episode, I'm hoping will help you to understand how are you getting in your own way of reaching your career goals, of reaching your goals in life, of finding connection, of finding new people to enter your circle in whatever way. Maybe it's the deepest innermost circle, and maybe it's not. Maybe it's that outer rung that connects you with new ideas and new people that leads you on an entirely different path, which you won't be able to see for days or months or years to come. How is the inner critic sabotaging you from reaching your goals? I hope this episode is helping you to see some of that. And more so, I hope that it means you make a different decision next time you're having that inner critic battle about networking. If you liked this episode, if you got something from this, then my request, my favor I'm going to ask you is if you can like, rate, or review this on whatever platform you're listening on, because I think that sometimes reaching our dreams, reaching our goals is just one connection away. So if you know somebody who needs to get out there more because you know they have a light to shine, you know they have more to do in this world, more abundance for them to attract, then share this episode and let's reach our goals together. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's so great to be with you. And until next time, ciao for now.